Council. I have the honor of standing in for the mayor who had a work conflict for the first half of the meeting. So I'd like to call the meeting to order. Ask you all to join me in rising for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. And since we have a bunch of kids in the audience, the kids would like to come up and help lead it.
Come on up, we don't bite.
You gonna help us? All right, we're ready. Pledge allegiance to the flag of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, and indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Yes. Ms. Conley,
Here.
Mr. Duncan,
Here?
Vice Mayor Hardy,
Here.
Ms. Leon,
Here.
Ms. Shantz-Hiscott is not here. She's traveling this evening. Mr. Snyder,
Here.
and Mayor Tarter is also at a work event and will be joining us later. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you. Let's move on to adopt the meeting agenda. Do I have a motion, please?
Madam Vice Mayor, I move to adopt the meeting agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Thank you. So moving on to proclamations and special presentations. I hear we are joined by a special group from Operation Earthwatch. Do you all want to come up? I hear that we also have a speaker joining us as well. Come on up.
wearing a t-shirt. Come on up. Good evening. Thank you for coming up. My name is Sarah Belden, and I have the privilege of working with a group of amazing volunteers and students who've been participating in Operation Earthwatch, some of them for many years. Operation Earthwatch is the city's environmental education and action program that operates at the three elementary schools in the city since 94. Whoops. And we're now in our 29th year. Since the 2018-19 year, the Village Preservation and Improvement Society has added us to their program, and it's been very helpful organizing our finances. The program is largely run by volunteers, and I'd like to recognize the volunteers who have helped this last year. I've been involved since 2008, but I stopped leading it a few years ago, and since this year we had Naomi Goodwin, who took on over overall leadership of the program, and she also did Mount Daniel, and I coordinate at Oak Street Elementary, and we have Paula Conrad, who works at St. James. Students who complete the full 6-month program every year earn a t-shirt to wear in the Falls Church Memorial Day Parade. And I should note that this year we won first place for the, there's our trophy. We won first place for the youth representatives. And the t-shirts are always designed by a student chosen through a contest. And this year, our t-shirt was designed by Olivia Whitley, who's right here. You can come and look at people too. And the words were added by Will Walter and Leah Forst, who are also here with us today. So we hope that the theme this year was climate change, and I hope that the t-shirts remind everybody to keep the environment in mind when making energy use decisions. Thank you, Olivia and Gregory and Leah. And our t-shirts are sponsored by a group of dedicated community organizations, businesses, several of whom have been involved with the program even longer than I have. We'd like to thank them. There's the Lions Club, which also donates the plaque on which we put people's names, and Village Preservation and Improvement Society, Art and Frame of Falls Church, Buyer Auto, Bikenetic, Clarendon's Beach Shack, Lazy Mike's, the Family Medicine of Falls Church Foot and Ankle Center, Falls Church Garden Club, and the O'Hara Law Firm. Thank you so much to everybody who's helped our program be successful all these years. And because, students who complete the 6 monthly activity sheets for all 6 years of elementary school get a special award, which they'll be given from school this year, and they also get their name on the plaque. And we have this year 3 students from Oak Street Elementary, Leah Forrest and Will Walter and Evelyn Witt. You could raise your hands. And we also have 1 student from St. James, Patrick Scully. I don't know if... So congratulations, that's quite an effort to do so many activities. It's over 120 activities. Thank you, and I hope you continue to protect the environment as you go through school. Thanks so much.
Thank you to this next generation of young environmental leaders. Why don't you all come up for a photo and a pin?
Sarah, that way. Yep, that'll be good. Where am I supposed to go? You're going to go up there too. We want everybody up there. So follow Miss Celeste with your trophy from the parade.
Well, hold the trophy.
Get on in there. Get the good angle. Get the good angle.
Alrighty, before moving on to the rest of the agenda, we actually have a surprise addition item on the agenda for a special member of our community who's joined us tonight. In honor of a milestone birthday and numerous contributions to our community, we had a surprise for Mr. Bob Young. And Phil will kick us off.
All right, it's my honor to begin the reading of the commendation for Robert Young on the occasion of his birthday. Whereas the City Council of the City of Falls Church wishes to recognize resident Bob Young for his contributions to the city, and whereas Mr. Young has generously shared his talents to make Falls Church a better place for all.
And whereas Mr. Young, principal of the Young Group and Jefferson One Development Entities, a native of La Jolla, California, a graduate of Vanderbilt University and the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, and a former analyst for the Defense Advanced Research Properties Agency, has concentrated his business and philanthropic efforts in Falls Church for nearly 2 decades, and whereas he has led the Economic Development Authority in advancing the economic development goals of the City of Falls Church.
Where?
Whereas during his tenure, the Economic Development Authority launched the city's wayfinding signage project, distributed over $500,000 in small business micro grants during the COVID-19 pandemic, helped develop and implement numerous programs to assist small businesses impacted by the pandemic, purchased and preserved affordable apartment buildings in Virginia Village on behalf of the city, and reviewed with insight and vision several high-profile developments. And whereas his projects have attracted new small businesses and provided teacher workforce housing and new housing types like the award-winning railroad cottages. And
whereas he is a longtime member of the Falls Church Chamber of Commerce, serving on the Chamber Board and receiving the Chamber's Pillar of the Community Award. And whereas Mr. Young, along with other supporters of the Falls Church City Public Schools, founded the Falls Church Education Foundation in 2004, creating an organization that has grown to disperse over $250,000 a year to support the city's schools.
And whereas Mr. Young's contribution to the City of Falls Church are greatly appreciated. Now therefore, I, Letty Hardy, on behalf of Dave Tarter, the Mayor of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, and on behalf of the City Council of the City of Falls Church, do hereby commend and recognize Robert Young for his service to the community on the occasion of his birthday, and wish him continued success, good health, and happiness.
Thanks. I don't have a speech prepared, obviously, because I'm frankly flabbergasted. I can't tell you what a great honor I consider that. The fact that a part of my family, a significant part of my family, you're here tonight, makes me very, very proud. I think, as I said recently, I came to Falls Church in 1999. Took a long time to figure out how to work in Falls Church, but now it's my community, and I can't tell you how much I love it and appreciate it and depend on it. Thank you all very much. It's just a great honor.
Family would like to join us up here as well.
Come on, everybody who's...
We hope you don't mind the surprise. Surprise! Hope you don't mind the surprise.
Oh, that's great.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Thanks for helping us cook it up. All right, thanks a lot. All right, my apologies for being late. I had a work commitment, so thank you all for your indulgence, and congratulations again to Mr. Young. Well-deserved recognition. Let's move on now. Madam Clerk, are we up to oaths of office?
Yes, sir, and we have, I believe, 3 tonight. First one is Ariadne O'Toole for the Arts and Humanities Council. Can you raise your right hand? Do you, Ariadne O'Toole, solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon you as a member of the Arts and Humanities Council according to the best of your ability, so help you God?
I will.
Thank you. And you are sworn in, and you are ready to take on your duties?
I'm ready to work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Before you go, well, no, you're leaving. Do you want to? Why don't you come up for a picture, and how about a pin as well?
Oh,
Yes,
there
your
you
first
go.
pin.
Feel free to get in the middle if you want. Yeah, get the good angle. Absolutely.
Cute. Next, we have Jennifer Tabola for the Environmental Sustainability Council. Can you raise your right hand, please? Do you, Jennifer Tabola, solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon you as a member of the Environmental Sustainability Council, according to the best of your ability, so help you God?
I will.
Thank you. And
Thank
you are
you.
ready to take on your duties with the ESC.
Thank you.
Would you like to?
All right, wait a second, have you gotten your pin yet? Yes, you want one, I know you do. Any other oaths of office, Madam Clerk?
Sarah Belden was here, but she stepped out. So we'll see if she comes back in.
All right, well, I think that probably does it then. Why don't we move on to receipt of public comment?
Yes, would you like me to read the written comments?
Yes, I would.
All right, I can do that. Regarding real estate taxes, Diane Duggan wrote with concerns about the size of her real estate tax bill in relation to disruptions from development and other construction near her property. Edwin Kim wrote with concerns about the real estate assessment appeal process. Steve Miller wrote with concerns about real estate bill mailing timing and penalty amounts. Received several comments regarding transitional zones. Allison Brown wrote to support moving forward and referring the transition zone proposal to boards and commissions, which I believe has happened. Elizabeth and James Day wrote in support of moving forward. Joyce Page wrote to support moving forward with the transition zones proposal. Keith Thurston asked that any changes to transition zones take into account all of the impacts and advised that it is not appropriate to create a wider by right zoning in transition areas. In other comments, Meredith Anderson wrote in support of restoring library operating hours. Sean Dakin provided information about encouraging residential solar, about gas appliance bans, about encouraging reusable water bottle use, about traffic enforcement, and using speed cameras in school zones. John Nowlin recommended putting an armed police officer in every school until the schools arm their security guards. And Mike Stady, a city employee, wrote in appreciation of the city's homeownership and homeownership education program.
All right, well, thank you much. Let's move on to the receipt of public comment. Do you have any speakers, Madam Clerk?
Nikki Graves Henderson is here to speak about the Juneteenth celebration.
All right.
Thank you. Excuse me. Good evening. I hope everyone has recovered from the music festival this past weekend, and I'm glad we didn't get rain like we have right now. I am Nikki Graves Henderson from 307 South Maple Avenue in Falls Church, Virginia, and I come before you this evening to invite all of you in our community to the Juneteenth celebration, which is a joint celebration with Tenor Hill Heritage Foundation, the Falls Church Episcopal, and Rock Christian Center. It will take place on Sunday, June 19th. Juneteenth is a celebration that started in Texas in 1865 and has been continuously celebrated. It commemorates the freedom of the last enslaved African Americans in America when they received word that they were free 2 years after the emancipation, when the federal troops came in with the proclamation as well as the manpower to enforce the order. And on Sunday, we will gather for a joint sermon at the church at 10 a.m. Then there will be a coffee hour, and at 12 in the afternoon, the unveiling of a mural on the blacksmith shop. The thing that's important about the mural is that it commemorates a black man and a white man who were in business together for 50 years and were able to overcome the Jim Crow era, and we feel that it's a model for the turbulent times that we're in. So I'd like everybody to come out and learn a little more about the history which sometimes is disheartening, but has models for us. We've been here before, and we have something that we can look at and repeat the pattern for, and hopefully overcome the struggles that we're currently dealing with. Anybody have questions?
All right, well, thank you much.
Thank you.
Nikki, just a question about the mural
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be unveiled on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And where is the blacksmith shop?
The blacksmith shop is at the edge of the church's property. It's behind, it's across the street from the Scramble, the indoor gym, almost directly there.
So it's on Fairfax.
It's on Fairfax Street. It's right, if you know where the thrift store is, anybody knows where the thrift store is. It's right in front of the thrift store, or to the left, going towards Broad Street. It's a little black brick building that is not the actual building where the blacksmith shop was. It burnt down in the 1940s or 50s, but it's the exact location. So it's a historic area or building or site here in Falls Church.
Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. We appreciate it. Madam Clerk, next speaker.
Yes, we have Joseph Shirizzi. He's going to speak about Great Streets, and then we have an oath of office as well following him.
All right, sounds good. Welcome.
Good evening, City Council. Joseph Shirizzi, Gundry Drive. My comments this evening do not represent any organization. I'd like to say that the Friday before last, we had a community event with city planners in the community center about the Great Streets project on Park Street. Dozens of citizens showed up to voice their support for a bike lane or possibly 2 bike lanes or removing parking, and there were a lot of great ideas, really mostly centered around how can we make Park Street a really great community space and not just a space for cars. I think that enough of downtown Falls Church is parking. I think that enough of downtown Falls Church is flat paved paving of paradise, and it could be a really beautiful community area if we show that we have the will to do that. And I think the event last week was a great example of how much the community really cares about how we're thinking about our streets. And I think it is very important that this council take into the consideration bike and micromobility transportation as just a serious means of transportation as cars. I cycle everywhere. I do not own a car. I can possibly have seizures, so I cannot have a driver's license safely. And biking infrastructure is also disability infrastructure for many types of people. So I'm not a spandex-wearing power cycler highway person. I just have a milk crate on my bicycle that I use to get groceries. And I think you'll find that the majority of, a large majority of the people that were at this meeting in support of bike lanes on Park Street and bikers in our community are families, are regular people just trying to get around without having to spend so much on gas, or without having to pollute our air so much, or without having to cause so much asthma, which has much higher rates with people that live near freeways and highways and around car infrastructure. So as the Great Streets projects move forward, I hope that this council will take the suggestions of community members from the meeting very seriously and consider that we can have a huge impact on both the environment and the way we live just by making a few simple adjustments and allowing for 2 lanes of bikes instead of parking on Park Street. The space on the street belongs to the people. It does not belong to cars. And it's up to us how we decide how we want to use that. So the last thing was, we had this parade a few weeks ago. It was fabulous. The sign said street closed. That was the only time the street is actually open, because that is the time when it was being used most effectively by our community. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Madam Clerk, are there any other speakers, or we're on to oaths of office again?
Mr. Sharizi is going to speak about the former staff liaison on behalf of the ESC, but can we do an oath of office for one of the members before we do that?
Sure.
Thanks. Sarah Belden? Is that still on? Can you raise your right hand? Thank you. Do you, Sarah Belden, solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon you as a member of the Environmental Sustainability Council, according to the best of your ability, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, and you can continue your duties on the ESC. Thank you.
Would you like to get a pin? Everyone's been getting... You already got one. All right. Good for you. Thanks so much for your service. We appreciate it. All right.
And then Mr. Sharizi did have some comments about Kate Walker, who was the former staff liaison for the ESC.
All right. Well, long time no see.
Press this. Yes, hello. You could say that every week, actually. Okay, we're good. This is not actually from Just Sharizi. This is from the ESC. In our last meeting, the ESC unanimously voted to adopt this resolution that says Kate Walker has served as the Environmental Programs Coordinator for the City of Falls Church since 2016. She was essential to the 2020 rewriting of the Environment for Everyone chapter of the city's comprehensive plan, which lays out goals for proposed actions and policies the city can follow to greatly advance sustainable living in the City of Falls Church. She marshaled the community and the ESC to obtain their contributions for the 2020 update of the Environment for Everyone chapter. She served as staff liaison for the ESC, the Energy Transition Subcommittee, and expertly advised their members while providing regional and city data, contacts, communication paths needed by the ESC to best pursue its goals and navigate interaction with multiple city departments. She has served as a staff liaison to the ESC's Educational Task Group, supporting Operation Earthwatch, who was here earlier, in city schools, working creatively to improve its fiscal sustainability. She served as staff advisor to the Habitat Restoration Task Group, enthusiastically supporting its public education efforts, and the Habitat Restoration team that partners with volunteers of all ages to control invasive plants and restore native plants in city parks. Initiated outreach and education critical to the city being certified as a community wildlife habitat through the National Wildlife Foundation. And she has persevered in her many responsibilities throughout the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the ESC greatly appreciates all of the amazing and very difficult work that Kate Walker has done for the City of Falls Church. I hope that the City Council will acknowledge that as well and consider the position that she's leaving, consider raising the wherewithal of that position in status in the city to a, I forget what the word, is it a director position? And consider how much that she has really done to improve the livability and the sustainability of Falls Church overall. So that was adopted anonymously by the ESC, and I hope that you will take it seriously. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and we do greatly appreciate and honor Kate. We'll have to honor her when she's actually here, but hopefully we can get her here in the near future to do so in person. But thank you for your kind words towards Kate, and we appreciate the resolution or proclamation you all honored. Any other speakers tonight, Madam Clerk?
No, sir.
Okay, well, let's move on to council requests. Are there any council requests? Mr. Snyder.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We received several public comments about our assessment process, and I would ask that they be referred to the city attorney for review and response if the response hasn't already been provided. Secondly, just a quick commendation. It was a busy weekend in the City of Falls Church, busy weeks, actually, of very positive community events. Two, I wanted to especially recognize at the Tinner Hill Music Festival the dozens of volunteers that were active with that and the support of our major businesses, especially Tori McKinney and Rockstar Realty, and there may be others who want to comment on that. And then secondly, a League of Women Voters meeting yesterday where they heard an expert from the RAND Corporation speak about Russian interference in American elections, past, present, and most disturbing future. So that's a great program, and I'm wondering if at some point that might receive wider attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other council requests, Mr. Duncan? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Second the motion that they're on. The Legal Women Voters Program is very interesting. And the assessor situation. So after tonight's meeting, summer begins. Next time we'll get together here, I think it's June 27th, and we only have 4 meetings this summer, as I look at the calendar before we adjourn on August 8th. So keeping track of the assessment situation through the summer is a request that I would have, seconding what Mr. Snyder said. A couple other things. The signal at Gresham Place, everybody I think is familiar with the situation. We've heard from Vice Chair of the Planning Commission, Tim Stevens, and former Vice Mayor Steve Rogers on behalf of the Homeowners Association here at Gresham. But this also affects the office building, which we just were at the other day with the opening of the Pride Clinic. Safety getting in and getting out of that intersection is severely compromised by the problem with the signal, which has fallen out of sequence after 20 years of being a useful signal. It is now almost worse than nothing. And it straddles the Arlington Falls Church line in a way that complicates things. The manager is aware of this, and so is the Public Works Director. Just want to make sure that we don't end the summer without that problem having been solved. The other thing is the library hours. I did want to, the program yesterday that the League put on was the second Sunday that I'd been in the library for a program. Previous week there was another program there, Sunday afternoon slot. The problem is that because the library closes at 3 o'clock on Sundays, there's sort of a rush to get the program, whatever it may be, conducted and picked up from, and everybody shoot out of the building. I think there's some notion floating around that we don't have the money to keep the library open longer. Well, obviously we do have the money, we've just chosen not to deploy the resources that way. I'd ask that we take a second look at that because it's a terrific space for the community to gather down there in the basement of the library building. It's a wonderful setting for meetings, and it's just a shame that we have to rush people out of there on Sundays when they'd be inclined to stick around and, do what communities do, which is share ideas and camaraderie. So, at some point when we do budget amendment, I'd like us to consider seeing if we could allocate resources to keep the library open for at least another hour on Sunday afternoons. And then finally, the manager, I believe, sent some note around about Virginia 250 celebration initiative that is being launched out of Richmond, which is a nice thing, and seems like we ought to ask our historical commission to stand up a Falls Church version of that. And also, and this is something that the mayor brought up, or the manager brought up to me, the City of Falls Church's 75th birthday is next, I believe next August, not this coming, but next August. And I'd like to see us, have the appropriate recognition and commemorations related to that landmark birthday. So, time passes quickly. If we could get something stood up this summer, maybe it could do some studies and meetings and so forth and have a program ready for sharing with all of us in the new year. All right, thank you.
Ms. Vice Mayor Connell, Vice Mayor Hardy.
Thank you. Kind of a 1B related to tax bills. I think one of the public comments we received was actually a late receipt of tax bills, and our policy that even if you get your tax bill late, we still charge you the late fee. I want to understand how prevalent this was. Was this an issue with our vendor getting the tax bills out? And is that a hard and fast policy? And do we know how big of an issue this is?
We did get that letter in the mail over the weekend, and I have an inquiry into the treasurer for those numbers, and I'll provide that information to the city council.
Okay, anything else? I would just echo what we've heard previously. I mean, as far as that stoplight goes, everyone here has heard about it. Everyone here has offered to talk to people, and, it seems like this ought to be able to be solved absent, everybody getting involved. Is there something, an update you can give us so that we all don't have to personally intervene in some fashion with our neighbors in Arlington?
So just briefly for the public's awareness, so the signal at Gresham is controlled by Arlington County, and it is cycled to be in sync with the fire station signal and with the Westmoreland signal. The city has alerted the county to our concerns about the operation of that signal for months now. The county, at least the kind of at the frontline level, believes that it is cycling correctly, and so we've escalated that to top management with Arlington County. I've not had a response to that yet, but we'll continue to follow up on that.
Mr. Mayor, I would just say that I've already mentioned this to the Arlington County Board, one of the Arlington County Board members. So if we need help dislodging this, it seems to me the signal isn't functioning well if people can't get out of a street effectively, which is kind of where we are with this. So anything I can do to help, I'm sure others would volunteer as well. Thank you.
Yeah, let's just try to get this wrapped up one way or the other.
The city's request is pretty simple, just to restore it to the way it used to operate, the way it operated for years, quite satisfactorily. And so that's the request.
Okay, maybe just give us an update, and if need be, I think everyone here can intervene or would like to intervene and just get things wrapped up in the near future. Getting back to the tax issue as well, I mean, look, we just have to treat people fairly, and I think if you could just look into that and see if anyone has not been treated fairly, and if not, let's find a way to rectify that. It just seems like the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. So if you could give us an update on that in a timely fashion, I think that would be appreciated as well. Okay, anything else, or should we move on to business on the agenda? Or actually, next up is your report to us, so what do you have to say?
Well, thank you, Mayor. I've got a couple of things to report on, and I'd like to start off with an introduction. I think the council's already met our new communication specialist, who is here at the council meeting tonight, but Maggie Redden is here. And Maggie, I just want to welcome you aboard and appreciate you being here tonight. And she's been with us now for over 3 weeks, and has been doing great work for the city, and look forward to more to come. It's been noted with a couple of notes on the music festival this weekend, and just wanted to add to that with an expression of appreciation to the Tenor Hill Heritage Foundation and the many volunteers who pulled that event off. It was extremely well attended and a lot of fun. I also want to acknowledge the city staff, Scarlett Williamson, Amy Youngs, and the sheriff's and the Rec and Parks Department, and also the sheriff's department. Sheriff Kay has been very helpful in facilitating a safe and great event. An update on the South Washington Street Intermodal project. That project is open to the public to use, and so invite everybody to go down there just to walk on the new sidewalks and the new stormwater features. The one thing that we are still looking forward to installing is the history panels, and those will be in soon, and we'll have a ribbon cutting scheduled once those are up. And those history panels were put together with a great deal of community input and really tell a very important story of the history of this part of the city. I also ask the public to bear with us as we go through the South Maple and South Washington Street intersection improvements. Those are intended to improve pedestrian safety through that intersection, and as part of a larger vision for the entire Route 29 corridor, where we've worked with our neighbors in Fairfax County, had the benefit of a Virginia Tech study to assist us with us, but to improve pedestrian safety throughout that corridor. And these are needed investments, and we look forward to that project being completed as well. The other things to note for the public, I will just note with Juneteenth, the City of Falls Church, there was an earlier comment from Nikki Graves Henderson about the observance of Sunday the 19th is Juneteenth and will be observed statewide. And the state also is having a statewide holiday that will be on Monday, June 20th. So that's the official state holiday, and the city has declared that a holiday as well. So city offices will be closed next Monday on June 20th. And lastly, I'd like to note that on Thursday, city offices will be closed at noon for the annual employee picnic. And that's a great opportunity for employees to have a little bit of time off from their labors and have an enjoyable time together. So we ask the public's forbearance with us for that very worthwhile event. Those are the items I wanted to report on tonight. Happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Doesn't look like there are any questions. I neglected to add my second to Phil's comment about a 70, I guess, is that a, what is that, Jubilee? What do they call that? Is that what did the Queen just do? Is
I
that
think
the-
that's 75 is the Diamond Jubilee.
All right, well, if she can do it, we can do it. So I would just say if they could do it over there in England, maybe we could put something together, or at least think about it. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents. Did you have anything else you wanted to add? So we got a second maybe on that as well. So anyway, unless there's anything else, let's move on to business on the
Mr. Mayor?
agenda. Yes, Mr.
Just for a second, I wanted to, before we get too deep into the meeting, thanks to Scarlett and everybody who was involved in the Grand Marshal situation for the Memorial Day Parade. Just a note of personal privilege here, it was just a terrific event for Chet, and he loved it, every minute of it. And thanks very much to the mayor for hosting the luncheon. He and Carol and their family really very much enjoyed it, and Scarlett driving the cart, having him be able to be greeted by the library folks as they came through was really a nice touch. And so just please, thank you to all who had anything to do with that weekend.
Well, it's well-deserved, and he looked like he was having a good time, and so we're happy that he was able to participate fully. So anyway, all right, let's move on to business on the agenda. Madam Clerk, would you like to call the first item?
Yes, we do have a public hearing on TO 22-11, ordinance to amend ordinance 2026, 2027, 2032, 2034, 2038, and 2040 regarding the budget of expenditures and revenues, appropriating funds for fiscal year 2022 for the general fund, school operating fund, and the capital improvement program funds.
All right, thank you. Ms. Conley, do you have something you wanted to say before we get started?
I make the following statement before City Council's discussion of TO 22-11 related to the FY22 budget. I am an employee of the Falls Church City School Board and a member of a group of 3 or more persons who may be affected by these matters. I can participate in them fairly, objectively, and in the public interest.
Similarly, I make the following statement for City Council's consideration of TO 22-11 relating to the FY 2022 budget. My wife's an employee of the Falls Church City School Board, and therefore I'm a member of a group of 3 or more persons who may be affected by these matters. I can participate in them fairly, objectively, and in the public interest. Mr. Shields, or is Ms. Bowell joining us remotely?
So, Mayor, I will handle this item, and I'll just give a very short staff report. This is the year-end budget amendment, and the City Council reviewed this at work session and approved this at first reading at your last meeting. And this ordinance is now before you on second reading and final consideration. I won't go through all of the items in this budget. I'd be happy to answer any questions if council has any, but essentially what they are is they're recognizing some year-end revenue on the Rec and Parks side and appropriating that for our Rec and Parks programs, appropriating and making some reallocations amongst ARPA dollars that have already been appropriated by the City Council, and then an appropriation of school fund balance per the request of the school board. And then the last thing I'll note is there is an item to provide funding for open space acquisition, and that is an item that is on the agenda for later consideration to use those funds for the acquisition of 436 Sharrow Avenue, and we'll discuss that item a bit more when we get to it. So I'll stop there, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that the council might have on this budget item.
All right, are there any questions that anyone might have on that budget item? Mr. Snyder?
Thanks. The only question I have, Mr. Mayor, is the legislative session is still proceeding with the governor, still having several days to make significant changes that might affect tax revenue here in the city of Falls Church, potentially even extensively, if it's the grocery tax, for example, this city portion of that. So do we have sort of a contingency plan about how we're going to make up any holes that might be created in our budget as a result of some of this last-minute maneuvering?
Well, the General Assembly compromise was good for local government. It preserved the ability to have the 1% grocery tax that supports core government services, teachers, police officers, fire, human services, all of the core services that governments provide. And that is in the General Assembly's proposed compromise. There have been rumors that the governor still hasn't fully landed on this issue, and so we are concerned about potential contingencies. What we have been told is that in any event, the funding will be provided in the current fiscal year, even if that grocery tax issue is adjusted. We have had a Budget and Finance Committee review of our projections for year-end fiscal performance. Because the city has been recovering from the COVID pandemic at a very healthy clip and at a clip that exceeds our projections, we do anticipate that we will have a revenue surplus in the current fiscal year. That's not part of what this budget is amount, other than the Rec and Parks fees. That will be a discussion that we'll have in the early fall once all the numbers are in.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Any member of the public wish to speak to this matter? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Do we have a motion?
Motion to adopt T022-11, ordinance to amend ordinance 2026, 2027, 2032, 2034, 2038, and 2040 regarding the budget of expenditure and revenues appropriating funds for fiscal year 2022 for the general fund, school operating fund, and the capital improvement program funds.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Conley on the second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Yes, we have TO 22-12, ordinance to approve conveyance of the real property at 208 South Gibson Street, RPC number 52-309-005, to the City of Falls Church Economic Development Authority, EDA, in order that the refinancing of a total of 5 EDA-owned Virginia Village properties may occur as part of the Amazon 3 project.
All right, Mr. Shields.
If Ms. Mester can provide the staff report for this.
Good evening, Council. The action before you this evening is to grant first reading of this ordinance and then refer to the Planning Commission for their review pursuant to Charter Section 17.07 for transfer of public property. As you know, this is part of the Virginia Village Affordable Housing Project, and as part of that, we're refinancing the purchases of these properties in order to pay back the EDA's land banking funds, as well as council's capital reserve funds that were used to purchase 3 of the properties. So this will allow us to restore those balances to the EDA and council, and then going forward, the property would all be under the EDA as we move forward to pursue the Wesley Housing Partnership and purchase additional properties. So staff is recommending this be referred to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is scheduled to consider this Wednesday, pending council's favorable action this evening. And then the item would come back to council on June 27th for final action. This timing is important because this aligns with the financing with Virginia Housing for the 5 properties that are at Virginia Village. Having one borrower makes for a much more efficient and cost-saving effort because we're doing one loan, underwriting, closing, et cetera. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions, and
All right.
staff recommendation is to refer out. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Ms. Leon?
Thank you, Ms. Mester. What's going out to first reading, will it include comments from the city attorney? Or is that running in parallel?
Are you referring to the MOU or
Yeah.
the purchase of 208?
The
That's
MOU.
running parallel. This is a standalone
Got it.
action related to the transfer of 208 Gibson under the city's title to the EDA for the Virginia Housing Financing. Parallel to that, we're working with the city attorney and our stakeholders on the MOU, which includes all the components.
Okay, thanks.
Ms.
That's running in
McCoskey
parallel.
has reviewed this item in the resolution, however, and signed off on it as it became before you to ensure we were consistent with the charter requirements.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions?
And this is, if I have reviewed for the step 1, and we will deal with the contract later with Wesley.
Thank you.
Mr. Duncan?
Thank you. Just the pickiest of all nits. I noticed in the staff language on line 2, it refers to it as 208 South Gibson Street, and the whereas language is just 208 Gibson Street. I think the latter is correct, at least according to the plat from 1942 and the picture on the other side. So just make sure that's consistent in all the documents that we present. I don't think there's a North Gibson Street, is there?
No, Mr. Duncan, you're correct. Thank
Okay,
you for
thank
that catch.
Credit that to my mother-in-law. She noticed it. Still looking after all these years.
Excellent.
All right, any other comments or questions? Any public comment? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move to grant first reading to TO 22-12, refer to the Planning Commission, schedule public hearing and final consideration for June 27, 2022, and advertise the same according to law.
Have a second.
Second.
Snyder on the second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley,
Yes.
Mr. Duncan,
Yes.
Ms. Hardy,
Yes.
Ms. Leon,
Yes.
Mr. Snyder,
Yes.
and Mayor Tarter.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Thank you, council.
Thank you. Next item.
We have TR 22-28, resolution approving the purchase of the property at 436 Sharrow Avenue, RPC number 52-302-020, for an amount not to exceed $788,000, and authorizing the city manager to execute documents necessary for the purchase.
Mr. Shields?
Thank you, Mayor Tarver, members of council. And so the request tonight is to refer this acquisition to the Planning Commission for its recommendation and schedule a public hearing and final consideration at your next meeting on June 27th, 2022. The proposed purchase price for this property is an amount not to exceed $788,000. There is a provision in that in the contract with the sellers that they would be provided a period of time up to 12 months at no charge as they are seeking another property in the city. So that's an important part of the value proposition for this acquisition. In terms of the reasons for the acquisition, they are described briefly in the staff report. But some of the reasons the city has been interested in acquiring this property going back at least to the 2005 open space acquisition report, and then reaffirmed on several occasions in city planning documents since that time, is one, the property's adjacency to the Oak Street School, where it could be put to use for expanding outdoor uses associated with the school. The property is also adjacent to the Cavalier Trail and will allow for potential expansion and additional buffer for this natural greenway. The house itself is fully within the Trips Run floodplain and the floodway. And the floodway is, there are many houses that are in the floodplain that the city is not seeking to acquire, but this property is in the actual floodway, which means that there is water with velocity moving by sometimes through this property, and it has been a property that's experienced repeated flood damage through the years. The property is within the Trips Run Resource Protection Area, which also severely limits its redevelopment potential for the private sector or for private owners. So for these reasons, this property has been viewed as a property that the city has in its planning documents to acquire. The city also is a participant in the community rating system with the Federal Emergency Management Administration, which sets the flood insurance premiums for the city, for all the properties in the city. And doing things like removing properties or acquiring properties and taking properties out of the floodplain is one of the most highly rated activities that you can do under that community rating system. So this acquisition will also provide some benefit to all of the flood insurance premium payers in the city. Last thing that I will note, with its proximity to the Trips Run and to the Reagan Branch, which is a smaller stream that runs underground through the Oak Street property, Oak Street School property, there is the potential for a floodwater detention or other type of water quality improvement project on this property. The city has not done an extensive planning for what that highest and best use would be, but all of these would be eligible uses for this property. The city has sought federal and state funding to assist with this acquisition. We have some additional inquiries in right now to see if that would be possible for this acquisition right now. When the city has applied for grants through the Department of Conservation and Recreation, we've not been successful in getting open space acquisition funds to the city so far, but we'll continue to try to do that. We think that this type of acquisition should be eligible for those grants because it does so clearly meet state and federal policy objectives as well as the city's policy objectives. I'll stop the report there and happy to answer any questions.
All right, any questions for Mr. Shields? Any comments? Mrs. Conley?
I've never heard of the Reagan Branch. That's a new name. Where does that go?
I'm going off of memory, but this is an old David Eckert map where all the streams were named. And my memory was there's the Reagan Branch, but I have not looked at that map recently, so if someone wants to correct me, I'll stand
There's the
corrected.
Pearson branch that's there. Is that the one?
Pearson Branch is further down.
I think it goes to trickle down for
So the Code Branch comes in from the north. The Pearson Branch comes in at the Scout House, and I believe that this is the Reagan Branch. But it would be worth checking.
It is worth
those
checking,
maps.
yeah. That's just a name I hadn't heard before. Thank you for everything else as well.
All right, Mr. Duncan.
Scrambling, what's the parcel size? What's the acreage?
0.17.
0.17. So we're paying $788 for a little less than a fifth of an acre? Is that right? So roughly $800,000 for a fifth of an acre, so that puts it at the per acre price of $4 million. Okay. Just think folks need to be, I'm all for it. I mean, I'm totally all for it. I just think folks need to understand that, you know, we're making a serious investment when we spend $4 million on something, just as we did with Fellows, and that's a good thing for us to do, but it does cost money.
All right, anything else? Mr. Snyder?
Mr. Mayor, I just want to thank the city manager for running down the prospects for grant funding for this kind of thing. I think we really need to see if we can't reimburse the city if we decide to go forward in some way. There's quite a national discussion about doing exactly this. So in any event, thanks for continuing to run down the possibilities of non-city funding.
Okay, any other final comments? Any public comments? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move to refer TR 21-28 to the Planning Commission for its recommendation and schedule a public hearing and final consideration for June 27th, 2022.
I will second.
Who was on the second? Ms. Conley?
Hardy.
Hardy, okay. Madam Clerk?
Yes, and that is TR 22-28. It looks like the number also got transposed in the motion.
So what do you want us to do? Do you want us to?
That's fine.
Okay.
I'm just correct, it's just a typographical.
My piece of paper says 21, is that incorrect?
It should be 22-28, yes.
Who's responsible for that?
I move to refer TR 22-28 to the Planning Commission for its recommendation, schedule a public hearing, and final consideration for June 27th, 2022.
And I will re-second.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes?
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Thank you.
All right, we're off to consent items. Remember, we do have a work session at the end of this, a bit unusual, so we do have miles to go before you sleep tonight. So there's a consent agenda, that's where we're at now. Is there anyone who wishes to remove any item from the consent agenda? Recall that we heard about this at our last work session, all of these items. If not, do we have a motion?
May I move the consent agenda?
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Let's say Mr. Duncan on the second. I think he beat you by a flash. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So now, as I just alluded to a moment ago, we are done with the regular business of tonight, but on to a work session.
Mr. Mayor, I had a discussion under business not on the agenda. Do you want to take that now, or do you want to take it after our work?
Well, the agenda shows it later. I mean, if you want to mention it, go ahead. It's fine. Go ahead, sure.
Okay. So on Wednesday, the Transportation Planning Board is to vote on 3 options to reduce greenhouse gases in our region. Option 1 would call for a 50% reduction by 2030. Option B would reduce it by 32%, and option C would reduce it by 23%. All of these options are extremely ambitious. The two, option A and option B, come closest to meeting the overall climate objectives established by the Council of Governments and consistent with President Biden's goal of reducing greenhouse gases by 50% by 2030. Again, all of these are challenging. But when I mentioned the COGS goals, I think they were set as a response to a motion made by former council member Z in establishing our overall goals. The goals that are being talked about here are on-road goals, and if we were to do this, we would be the first regional body in the United States to establish specific on-road greenhouse gas reduction goals, not just simply overall regional goals, but on that. The Department of Transportation wants to go with the lowest of the 3 goals. That would be a 23% reduction. The Transportation Planning Board is fairly evenly split among the 3 goals. The staff recommended the intermediate goal, option B, of a 32% reduction, and I'm advised that that would meet the COG goals that were established. And of course, the 50% reduction would go even further, but the staff at the Transportation Planning Board indicates that there is no designated pathway to get there. So with that in mind, I think what I would do, subject to discussion, would be to prefer the most aggressive option A, but be willing to be satisfied with option B, which would be a 32% reduction in on-road transportation greenhouse gas goals, or greenhouse gases below the 2005 levels by 2030, and an 80% reduction by 2050. So I know I'm sort of introducing this new, but I thought I'd take any initial comments and any comments that folks want to make before the Transportation Planning Board meeting on Wednesday. But I plan to prefer option A, but be willing to live with option B.
Okay, any comments, Ms. Hardy, Vice Mayor Hardy?
Thank you. I agree with you, Dave, that we should pursue the most aggressive ones, partially because I think the COG goals reflect the Paris Climate Agreement, which would help us get to whatever the temperature increase or prevent us from getting there. And I know Debbie's not here, and unfortunately Joseph's not here from the ESC, but this feels like a meatier discussion they could have. But I think I support kind of what you said, which is go for the most aggressive one. And even if there's not a defined path by us as the leaders setting the goal, hopefully that means they're willing to prioritize resources so that we have a defined path going forward. And hopefully that sends a strong signal that this is urgent and important and merits resources. So I agree with you. So thank you for your work on this.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I also agree with what Ms. Hardy just said. I think let's be ambitious.
All right, other comments? I think everyone agrees with what Ms. Conley said about Ms. Hardy's comments, about your comments. So I think we all agree up here. So thank you for your fine work and leadership on these issues.
Thanks a lot. And if anyone has any comments between now and noon on Wednesday, please provide them. Thank you.
All right, let's move on now to the work session with the idea that we'll take a break maybe at 9:30 or so. But let's go ahead, Mr. Shields.
And Mayor, I might suggest we have Chief Gavin here, and she's here to speak to the next gen item. And maybe we could switch up the agenda and let her, which I think is a pretty short discussion,
Sure.
go first, and then we'll have the longer discussion on the work plan after that.
Okay.
So the request for the work session on next gen is we do have a contract authorization to take the next step with modernizing and updating our 911 dispatch systems, and the chief will tell you about that. The request is that this be placed on the consent agenda at your meeting on June 27th.
All right, welcome.
Thank you. I'm just here tonight to emphasize the importance of our 911 infrastructure. And you'll see in the report some of the background, but I just wanted to kind of take us how we got here. 911, as you all know, is critical to public safety. And it wasn't that long ago, it was 1999, where actually it became a mandatory universal number for public safety, which doesn't feel like that long ago. And then as we evolved from 911, we went into enhanced 911 in 2008, where we realized that not only the landline calls that we make from our homes or offices, but the wireless phone formats needed to be answered and then also had to be located. So 2008, the wireless enhanced 911 systems came into play, and that's when the government made sure all wireless carriers were making sure phone numbers were actually located by longitude and latitude. It gave us a better enhancement as to how to find people if they're walking around with a cell phone. Now, 10 years ago, probably 2012, they started working on the next generation 911. And that was with the insight of enhancing the infrastructure to ensure that police departments could not only get the type of data that we can receive now, may it be text, video, images, all kinds of things on different types of devices, but to also receive that information from devices such as medical devices, car computers, cell phones, all types of things that we know now to be able to deliver emergency information. But also what this enhanced 911 system does, it allows for the systems to call, for the call loading to share between what they're called points of public safety access. Falls Church is a secondary PSAP to Arlington County. we are married to Arlington County in terms of our dispatch systems. As you know, probably about 15 years ago, this region went to look at how do we make a regional dispatch center for all, for Arlington, Alexandria, and the city of Falls Church. And what they did is they started looking at that and researching, and part of that was trying to figure out some of the logistics, the governance, and then the equipment. We are now in an area where they have researched some of it. We are now looking towards acquiring the equipment, and I think we are probably several years out from actually regionalizing. And the reason we know that is just recently in the past 2 years, we did a study here in the City of Falls Church thinking that we could move towards this regionalized Next Gen 911. And what we found is there's a lot here that we need to fortify prior to doing that. Our 911 center here takes about 40,000 calls. Our dispatch center takes about 40,000 calls a year. Of the 40,000 calls we take, 5% are 911 calls. So the 95% are calls for service that are not necessarily, they could be emergencies that we change, in the system. They could be just calls for service for the city. Of the 30% of those, about 35% of those calls, they're nothing to do with public safety. They are calls that are being centralized into our dispatch center to be taken care of. And why I say this is important is if we were to go to a regional dispatch center that was public safety centric, you're losing all of this calls for service that are coming into the city that have nowhere to go now because we have no dispatch center. And the dispatch center does a host, and we did a study, probably 2 to 3 pages, one line, of all the things that they do in addition to answering your calls for service. They do a lot of the monitoring, all of the cameras. They monitor all of the alarms. They monitor all the prisoners, which is a big deal for us, particularly on court dates and things. So there's a lot of stuff that we need to figure out prior to this regionalization. So my ask here tonight, and it's very vital that as a city that we keep up with the Joneses. We need to have, and there's no other options, we need to have this contract realized so that we can have the 911 infrastructure to receive the information from Arlington and or to receive the information from Fairfax when someone calls 911. It's a system in which Fairfax County went to back in 2020, and it's a system in which Arlington County is just realizing this past month, May. If we weren't able to do this, then we wouldn't be able to talk. We would not have seamless service. We would not be able to get the 911 calls that we would need crucially to respond to service. I am profoundly proud of what our dispatchers do, and particularly all the Arlington County dispatchers do. It's a nice hybrid service that we have in an agreement with Arlington. We will still plug forward to researching what does regionalizing dispatch mean. But I think also what that means is what do we do here in terms of the city and making sure that we have a call center here to fortify our calls for service. But this consent item is critical to our public safety service. It is the next step in the next generation 911. It's something that's exciting because there's got so much information that we'll be able to provide or to receive into helping people. And I'm here for any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you so much. Questions, Ms. Leon?
Thanks, Chief. Totally supportive of this, and I'm actually surprised that it's only $250. Is that going to cover it? Like, does that include any consulting to configure that software? Because I'm seeing that it's just hardware and software.
Right. There is a second phase that we're looking to into the next this next year, and that is probably up to towards $100,000. Working with what I currently have in terms of my budget and looking towards some of the seized assets that we have to covering that. But we want to get this first phase done. That's the hardware. And I think, like you said, the second phase is actually coming in and testing the marriage between us, Arlington County, and Fairfax County in terms of how the data is received. There will be some training from the state for the dispatchers, because it's a lot more data and information that they'll be receiving. And then there's testing. There's also, you should know that in our communication center, there's 21 lines, phone lines. That's a lot of phone lines. Some are just designated for 911, and some are just admin. And then there are radio channels. There's 4 radio channels. So of all of those channels, all of those telephone lines, we have to also purchase a recording system that would marry up not only with our system, but with Arlington's system. Because how our system works is if you dial 911 in this building right here, it will go to Arlington. Arlington will get the information and then download it back to Falls Church. If you're at the school system, oftentimes out on the west end of the city, sometimes you dial 911, it goes to Fairfax County, and then it comes back here. It's the same seamless service, it's just that sometimes our dispatchers are taking it from 2 different entities, because those are called primary PSAPs, or primary points of public safety access. So,
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Connolly?
Thanks for all that information, Chief Gavin. Will the city's IT staff be charged with installing all this, or is this something that comes through the police department?
Actually, there is the vendor in here, Carousel Industries, is somebody that the whole region actually has been working with, and we've been working with for years. They're like the only game in town in terms of next-gen hardware. They will be assisting, but the primary installation is done by Carousel, and a lot of the training is done by Carousel. We obviously consult IT and Jamal's team often, but most of when it deals with 911, it's dealing with Carousel Industries.
Any other questions, comments? All right, thank you very much. We much appreciate it. Mr. Shields, you want to go into the work plan now?
Can I just say, I think
Of
we
course.
need to amend the agenda, because the first work session item on this agenda is the resolution to purchase the property at 436 Sheriff. Doesn't have the works, the work plan discussion isn't on here.
Oh, it's actually, yes.
Yeah, so I don't know which one is the real agenda.
Oh.
It looks like it's a typo in the agenda, the first item.
Okay.
Okay. I
Yeah.
apologize for that. But so what is intended to be on the work session is the council work plan.
All right, let's get on with the work plan.
Okay, and this is the last item on the agenda, so Cindy will call up the draft. And so what I'd like to do this evening is just walk through the items on this. And I did this morning with staff. We had a staff retreat about 10 days ago where we worked together to take the main signals that the city council sent with its priorities in its retreat back in February. The report from that retreat is in the council packet tonight as a reference. So staff read that report, but also consulted all of the CIP and other work plan items and other discussions we've already been having with the city council to develop this proposed draft work plan. My hope tonight is to get council feedback and refinement of it. I do think it is a very large, and I think it's a very aspirational work plan. And so I think there does need to still be some refinement, obviously, and council direction on this. But I think it's also one we need to have a discussion about our ability to sustain this level of program and project delivery with the resources that we have. To summarize some of the key things that are in this work plan, they're organized according to the main things the council identified at its council retreat. And the council at its retreat really did, I think, anchor some of its thinking on the city's comprehensive plan and some of the main principles that are laid out in that. So if we start at the top at line 114, we'll go through the areas of work in that fall in the bucket of small-town character in an urban setting. And so some of the work plan items that are in that area include furthering commercial district amenities and implementing an enhanced tree lighting plan, which includes selecting a street lighting vendor and evaluating the feasibility of expanding lighting for the entirety of Broad Street. At line 123, expanding the street flower basket program to include the South Washington Street corridor, and particularly the South Washington Street Intermodal Plaza, which has just been completed. At line 125, complete the property yard planning study, and this is an item that was funded in the capital improvements program to really do a feasibility study about the future of the property yard and what acreage might be able to be put into potentially either park use or private development use through, which we can arrive at through that planning process in concert or in coordination with possible future private development in the Gordon Road Triangle. For the East End Planning Opportunity Area, adopt the East End plan, which is currently under development, and schedule implementation of the public improvements called for in that plan through the CIP. In park and open space initiatives, finalize and adopt the Fellows Property Master Park Plan and begin to implement that plan. This item at line 136, city support for community-run events and festivals. So the idea here was city funding to encourage more lively events in the city. And so the way staff, we've kind of worked this, is refine the existing special events policy and application process to allow city financial support for certain community events that get funding by the city council, but while also reducing the growth of in-kind unfunded city staff support for such events. So the Tenor Hill Music Festival is an example of that, where we work with the community and say this is what the city can provide, and then those partners run with it and create a great event. The public art initiatives, develop and adopt a concise and readable city public art policy that incentivizes, guides, and encourages public art and private art with a public face throughout the city. Complete at least 4 utility box wraps per year with local artists in the lead and the city as a facilitator. Also in this area, right scale and massing for new development. This was something that was discussed quite a bit and was a high priority item in the council's retreat of considering the scale and how projects interface with surrounding neighborhoods. So review and update the existing urban design guidelines for appropriate scale and massing standards, green building and site standards, so green building and green site standards, including biophilic design for future commercial and residential projects, and codify the results as necessary. So this would be a major undertaking by the planning staff. So we just want to note that. I think we would need contracted services, which are not currently budgeted, so we need to have that discussion as well. So then shifting to economic sustainability and vitality, we just note up front, we do have major construction projects happening in the city, and that will take a great deal of staff time and effort, and I'm sure the council's attention as well. As West Falls, Broad and Washington, Founders Row 1 and Founders Row 2 go to either complete construction or go into construction. Identify top commercial uses desired in new developments in the city and negotiate for those uses in the SE process. So the city did this once about several years ago, and we could update that review just so we have a kind of a good playlist of when developers come to the city and ask us, well, what are you all looking for in terms of the commercial uses? We can point them in the right direction. Promote Falls Church as a restaurant destination with marketing initiatives, including an inaugural restaurant week and other similar programs. Develop 4 new parklets for outdoor dining and gathering. So that would be 4 over the 2-year planning period. Infill development standards and promotion. adopted transition zoning code amendment that facilitates redevelopment of smaller infill properties with appropriate building heights and uses that enables a harmonious transition between higher density business districts and lower density residential neighborhoods. Downtown parking, work with existing businesses to promote shared parking agreements and work with developers to encourage shared parking arrangements with existing businesses and new development. At line 184, complete a study to update residential parking requirements and transportation demand management requirements in the zoning code. We did apply for a COG grant to help with that. We didn't get that grant, so we need to look to fund that. One other initiative that Jim Snyder mentioned in our staff meeting this morning is older businesses and older business districts. Facilitating redevelopment and parking requirements sometimes can be a real obstacle to revitalization in our older commercial districts. So that's another point we might want to think about from a policy perspective. Business-friendly initiatives. Expedite commercial permits to enable businesses to open more quickly, including one-day walkthrough permits for small tenant improvements. Implement a new online interface so builders can monitor permit status more easily. And that's a Munis module that we're looking to deploy. And the council has supported that with an additional Munis staff member who can help with that project, along with programs for the Treasurer and Commissioner of Revenue so people can access those services online more easily as well. Shifting to mobility, we've got really a lot of projects that are already approved in the CIP, and so we'll just list those quickly. I think the council is familiar with all of these. Complete the Broad Street Hawk Signal pedestrian crossings project. Complete the South Washington Corridor sidewalk needs assessment. This has been funded with through the Transportation Planning Board with COG. Complete the W&OD Street Crossings Project. Complete the Berman Park Crossings Project. Update the city's ADA transition plan that sets the highest accessibility standards above the minimum ADA standards for all city rights-of-way. Implement a new program to refresh all crosswalks to meet high visibility standards on an annual basis. And complete the Parks and Open Space Connection Study, which is relevant to that 436 Sherrill acquisition, but that's a study that is underway right now to seek ways to connect the W&OD with Berman Park, Howard Herman, Stream Valley Park, and the Cavalier Trail. Neighborhood traffic calming, complete the Greenway Downs traffic calming project, and then secondly, update the NTC procedures to incorporate lessons learned in recent projects, including clarifying the roles of resident block captains, CACT, and staff, project manager, and communicating project status and decisions. Street infrastructure priorities, these are all in the CIP as well. The $1.4 million for sidewalk missing links. Complete the intersection improvements at North Washington and Columbia. The intersection improvements at South Maple and Annandale, and the Oak Street Bridge with an improved pedestrian facilities. And that project will actually be managed by VDOT, which is very helpful to us. Complete the final design for the Park Avenue Great Streets project, including the underground utilities, installation of streetscape along Park Avenue, and the State Theater, from the State Theater to the library, and award a construction contract for this project. So in the 2-year plan, get this ready and out on the street for bids and under construction. This is the project that was referred to during the public comment period from the chair of the ESC just a bit earlier. Bicycle master plan, adopt a citywide bike master plan. We need to update our existing one using the Virginia Tech student study as a beginning point, and which includes developing and adopting a safe routes to school for biking to the Mary Ellen Henderson and Meridian campus in particular. Transit and transportation innovation, implement the Smart Cities grant in coordination with the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute, VDOT, and private developers at the West Falls project, which will apply $10 million in state funding to bring emerging technologies and transportation innovation to this district. Engage with the regional planning effort for bus rapid transit from Alexandria to Tysons, and incorporate this regional plan in all city planning documents and CIP. In the area of public health and public safety, interrupt me if anybody wants to give me a chance to pause if you have any questions about these. We're rolling though. There's a lot of good stuff in here.
I did have a question of the stuff before. Do you want to go through it, Wyatt?
Do you want me to just
Why
kind
don't
of
you power through?
power through and then we'll circle
Yeah.
back?
We'll ask.
Okay.
Got it.
In the area of public health and public safety, traffic safety enforcement. So, complete the feasibility study for the speed camera enforcement for school zones and work zones and implement the recommendations of that study. Implement a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit plan for residential streets in the city. Emergency management. Meet with all condo boards in the city to assist them with emergency planning relating to prolonged power outages, fire, weather, and terrorism-related emergencies. Adopt an update to the city's all hazards emergency management plan. This is a major effort that you have to do every 5 years to be in compliance with VDEM, and that effort's underway. This is part of our ongoing work that we do with the schools on a regular basis and on an annual basis. But one of the items that we need to complete is a reunification plan for students and parents for all public schools in St. James. To just go through that planning process so that if that's needed, we'll know how to roll that out. Complete security audits for all city buildings and implement the key recommendations. We did bring an outside group to do that audit, and we're actually right now in the implementation mode. I just wanted the council to be aware of that important effort. And then the one we just spoke of in the area of emergency communications, complete the Next Gen 911 project to allow residents to contact 911 emergency services through multiple communications platforms. Environmental sustainability and leadership, carbon emissions reductions, implement the new, the DPW Green Fleet Grant, which includes 6 new electric vehicles and 6 new hybrid vehicles and 10 charging stations at the property yard. Complete the LED streetlight pilot program, evaluate the results, and complete the citywide conversion project. Adopt a community energy plan that sets out the practical strategies and programs needed community-wide to achieve the city's adopted greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. And then following on right behind that, adopt the city government emissions reduction plan to lay out the practical steps needed by general government and schools to achieve the city's adopted greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. So green building design and development standards, this is linked back to the sort of the massing item, but associated with that is develop the city's green building design guidelines for private and public buildings to include tree canopy and biophilic design concepts. Complete the community center energy efficiency upgrades for lighting and HVAC. The council has funded that in the CIP and will complete that this year. Stormwater, so complete the construction of the priority stormwater projects prioritized by the Stormwater Task Force, and those include the Trammell Branch project, the Hillwood 1, and the Sharrow Ave project. The greening of Lincoln project is a bit more complicated, so what we're committing to is completing the design phase and be ready for bid for that project within the 2-year plan. Complete a watershed-wide stormwater system model to drive stormwater CIP investments and evaluate private development's impact on downstream stormwater systems. Establish 2 stream gauges, one on Trips Run and one on 4 Mile Run, and 2 rain gauges, one at the property yard and City Hall, to accurately measure both rainfall and discharge in the city. We have a grant pending with the U.S. Geological Survey. They'll come in and do that work for us for $35,000. Sanitary sewer systems capacity. Expand the sanitary sewer capacity to handle West End growth by purchasing additional capacity from Fairfax County, and also completing the pipe bursting expansion project that's been approved in the CIP. Those projects are paid for with developer fees. I think it's worthy of noting. Complete a study to identify sources of inflow and infiltration in the sanitary system that cause sewer backflows in the Hillwood Avenue sewer shed and the West Columbia Lincoln Ave sewer shed. Implement the recommendations from that study. Solid waste management, complete an update to the 10-year solid waste plan. The update should address issues such as recycling rates, solutions for glass recycling, and evaluating the merits of a pay-as-you-throw policy. Inclusiveness and social sustainability in the area of affordable housing. Create and adopt a set of incentives for employees to purchase or rent in the city, such as expanding homeownership program, ADUs, meet general government and school employee income levels and housing needs. Adopt a transition zoning code amendment. This is linked to an earlier one to facilitate the creation of new multifamily dwellings with affordable units on smaller infill development sites. Develop a plan to preserve housing that provides diversity to the city that includes properties such as the Fields, Virginia Village, Broad Falls, and Merrill House. Amend the affordable housing policy to serve lower income population and service industry homeowners and renters by implementing a lower scale AMI below 60% as part of voluntary concession negotiations and grant applications. Diversity in citizen appointments and city management. Increase the economic diversity in appointments to boards and commissions to include racial, economic, and housing type diversity. Pursue a charter amendment to strike the registered voter requirement for appointment to boards and commissions. The council has asked for that charter amendment, and it was approved by the General Assembly and then vetoed by the governor. And so this stands for going back to see if we can get that through. Prepare an annual report on diversity and hiring for city staff positions with a focus on diversity in supervisory and management positions. Cultural assessment. Complete a cultural assessment of the city government workplace to develop a better gauge on how the city workplace handles issues of diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging from the perspective of city employees, to include a review of city policies as well as direct input from city employees, and then implement the recommendations from this cultural assessment. The city is using Metropolitan COG to help us with that assessment, and HR has that effort underway. Effective and responsive governance, and this is the last section, and so we'll wrap it up here in just a moment. So city, citizen education, and communication initiatives. So updating the website is the first one listed here. Develop a communication enhancement plan for the city to include reconstructing the city website to make it more navigable, engaging, and dynamic. City council staff process review. So this is part of the discussion during the council retreat about the number of meetings and the roles of boards and commissions. So what this would stand for is let's actually sit down and look at it, appoint a committee of staff and council to assess the purpose, type, and frequency and duration of public meetings, city council, and boards and commissions, and report to city council with findings and recommendations by fall of 2022. Human resources support. So there's two key ones here that the council has funded, and one is to complete the employee compensation and class study by fall of 2022 and implement the recommendations. And then second, complete the staffing study by January 2023 to inform FY 2024 budget development. Information technology systems, implement the CIP to invest in core IT infrastructure and back-end systems to improve security and modernize support to better serve the public and staff. General government facility reinvestment, update the public facilities chapter of the comp plan in order to develop a long-term capacity for general government and school facilities, parkland, and utilities that includes population growth projections stemming from city land use policies, development trends, and regional population trends. So this is one that we have been discussing with the schools to update our enrollment projections and have that tied to land use policy, but also tying that into other facilities as well. And then lastly, partnerships for education. So with city and school cooperation, complete and formalize a revenue sharing agreement between the city and the schools, and provide access to city schools for children of city employees. So That came up actually out of the staff retreat as a benefit for employees that we need to take a look at. We've not yet discussed this with the school administration, but I wanted to share that input from city staff. And then lastly is through NOVA, the Northern Virginia Community College, the city does have training dollars that are available for staff. And so we want to implement that opportunity and provide particularly our project managers, our contract managers, and our IT staff in particular have their programs that I think are tailored and can be quite helpful for staff in that area. So that is a read through, and I look forward to commentary and feedback and direction on this.
All right. Well, thank you for that. I know this is a 2-year plan. It felt like a 2-year summary. There's a lot there. But we thank you for your ambition and the thoughts you have. Let's go ahead and open up to questions, maybe with the idea that we will take a break around 9:30. Questions, comments, thoughts? Ms. Leon, did you have something earlier?
Yes, regards to the business-friendly initiatives, I think it's also important that we put on 193 that we want to also benefit residents as part of this muni implementation. I think we want to be careful of not just benefiting, right, the commercial side, because I think we've heard from residents that they would appreciate more transparency and online capabilities to know where their permit process is. Additionally, when we look at, on the affordable housing front, flipping through pages. On line 348, it's subtle, but I feel it's important because I think we've talked about it and we have things in play, right, that we're looking at work session as well as council meeting to put in motion. But line 348, I think it's important to state that not only do we want to preserve the housing, but we want to expand that housing stock that provides the diversity to the city. So I'd recommend, and I don't know if folks have any comments, but, you know, adding not only preservation, but expansion of affordable housing stock. And I reconciled that to the minutes. So I just wanted to carry that through.
And when you, are you saying that expansion at these particular sites as well?
It's a good point, Wyatt. We might need to create I think we have an objective to expand the housing stock, right? We've got Amazon grants that we're looking at that I see is missing here. I support the preserving part. I feel it's really important to cite that specifically, right? That being the words expansion of affordable housing stock. And also mentioning that it's not just rentals, but we're looking at supporting ownership and equity opportunities. I don't know if others have thoughts.
Yeah, I support that sentiment. I don't think it has to be at those properties that are listed, but it's preserve and expand, which is what we've been doing. So it's important to call that out, I think.
Other thoughts? Ms. Conley?
So, Mr. Shields, this is not what I was expecting that we were getting in a work plan. I don't know if I should channel Dan Z or what, but this seems like just a bucket of stuff that people want to get done that they're like, oh, okay, we'll do that, we'll do that, we'll do that. But it doesn't seem to have any, like, the connection to what we actually talked about in the retreat. Maybe my memory fails me, but I'm not, like, when did we talk about parklets in the retreat? Was that a thing? When did we, there's so much in here, there's just so much in here that it doesn't seem like what should be on a council work plan. That it's more of a staff work plan, and the council is the policy, and the staff is I mean, I know it matters to us that we get public art, but to actually have in the council work plan that we're going to do 4 pieces of public art, that just, I don't know, I'm kind of lost. And then there were things that I thought we talked, with our dots and stuff. Where is all that? Is that in the minutes?
So that is in the report, which is also in the packet.
So was there stuff that we,
So just to respond, so generally, if the council had a discussion about, let's say, business-friendly initiatives, so that's where the parklets came out of, because it's a discussion with the EDA about how can we serve the restaurants who are, dealing with, it had been about how they're dealing with COVID, et cetera. And so that's an initiative that's coming up through the EDA. It's how we're going to be using the ARPA funds, and it was tied to the council discussion about being a business-friendly city. So that's kind of the general dynamic. If the council was talking about business initiatives, then staff would have some additional ideas on specifics associated with what that means.
okay. This just seems to be a laundry list of projects. The tie-in is missing here, and there are things that I thought would be in here that aren't in here, and so I don't know. I feel like there's a lot more work that needs to get done until this is actually a work plan. And then another question just related to, and you talked about the Munis part of the new website. Is it a new website? It's just a portion of the website?
So what Munis offers is a self-service module. So on the permit side, you can go in and check the status of your permit. On the tax-paying side, you can have an easier interface. Right now, we have a vendor that's outside of Munis, and it's just a little bit more steps. So that's what that's associated with.
So it's not the website, but you can access from our website into the Munis portal and then be able to pay, file, do it electronically instead of paper.
Is there consideration of doing a new website? You mentioned that.
Yeah, so that's a separate item. That's under the communications area.
And it would be a whole new website?
Well, we're looking at kind of what's the best options that. We currently contract that with Civic Plus, and a lot of local governments do, and it's, but there are other vendors out there, and so one of the things we would consider is, do we want to just change vendors completely? That does not necessarily impact so much directly the self-service, the building permits, because those modules will work with whatever website vendor we choose.
So a couple of things. I feel like some of the things that are on here that we're talking about would be benefited, would be cross-hatched, cross-referenced with a new website. Some of these things could be solved, I think, if the website was more user-friendly. That would be really helpful in a lot of ways. I just feel like it just needs to be organized in a way that actually shows what the policy is versus what the work is, because they're kind of blended in there, where we have come up with a policy about green infrastructure, and then next to that, something else. So I do think there's a hierarchy of those things. What's the council's work and what's the staff's work?
Right.
And then my last things, I just happened to come across the Vienna website, Vienna, Virginia website, which is super user-friendly, really easy. They have I think they use Munis for part of it, but they're tracking all the things that we keep talking about. A lot of it is on there. So I think that would be a good place to start as far as looking at websites. Anyway, there's a lot of work on here, almost too much work for people to get done, and it just seems like it's all thrown in there. So that is my comment.
Other comments? Ms. Vice Mayor Hardy.
Okay. Thank you. So I can see where that's coming from. So I guess I'll have some general kind of themes and then more specific. So things I really liked. So I love the fact that many of the items actually said complete this project, complete that project, because many of these projects we've been talking about as long as I've been on council. And so it's great to see that we think in the next 2 years we're actually going to get them done. So I love that part of it. I also loved actually the specificity. So actually calling things out and making commitments on, hey, we're going to do 4 parklets, 4 utility boxes. I do think it's important to hold ourselves accountable to measurable goals. And so I do like that part of it. I can see where that's concerned, though, because what's missing for me is the connection of the policy. And so when I look at, for example, line 116, maybe we just need to expand that to kind of espouse kind of what the policy goal is there, and then how those specific projects can actually accomplish that. And maybe that would kind of connect it better to what we talked about. There were, I guess, I was kind of surprised that there were new items or projects that were not discussed in the retreat. I'm fine with that if this ultimately ends up being what staff would like to propose to kind of meet those policies and those goals that we've espoused. So I could see the concern there, but overall, I love, again, the aspiration to complete so many projects, the number of specific things that we're calling out that we're actually going to accomplish. Other general themes. So one thing that was missing for me around transportation, because I think that's something that we're fairly all unified on wanting to do, and I think a general theme that we've talked about is while we are accomplishing a lot in the CIP and clearly have lots of projects coming to completion, there's a sense that we are not as nimble and responsive as we need to be on transportation. And so while we're getting a bunch of big projects done like the South Washington, which predates many of us even up here, I think we're hearing from our residents that we need to be more nimble and to be willing to try out unconventional things like paint on crosswalks or bollards. I think the number of times I hear from the CACT about tactical urbanism, and I know that we are a little apprehensive about that because of maintenance costs. I think we need some more thinking on how we can enable that, because we can't put concrete down everywhere, and I think it's okay to try out some risky things. And while we wait for the concrete, is it okay to try out those more innovative approaches? Likewise on bikes, I would like to see bigger emphasis on bikes. And going back again to the goal of, can we be more specific? Can we commit to something that says, let's have 1 mile of protected bike lane in the city in the next 2 years? Like, not just have the updated bike master plan, but something more ambitious. So we actually put a marker down that says, we're going to find a place, either protect an existing bike lane or find a new place for a bike lane, but put that marker out so that that drives our work and our commitment towards it. So that was kind of the first theme, is really on transportation. Love all the stuff that we're committing to, but would like to see a more general theme of how to be more nimble and try new approaches around transportation and safety. Second, on affordable housing, I like Caroline's suggestions, making sure we talk about expansion. What's missing for me is, so when I think about kind of where we've progressed in the past 4 or 5 years on affordable housing, we've always said we need to do more. Now that we've gotten more sophisticated, I would love to see it get to a place where it's more but with details. So how many units at what AMI level, rental or ownership, and set goals that way. And I think we can do some work based on our demographic study that I think was in the comp plan a couple years ago on what we expect our population growth and our housing needs to be. So let's get more sophisticated. It's not just we want more housing and more affordable housing, but let's put some specific targets out there. We want to build 50 units of housing at this AMI level by this date, and that will drive the right strategies on what we want to do. Along the same lines, we've talked a lot about missing middle housing. I think there's a lot we can learn in the region on what's happening there, but I would like some sort of call out, either a study of, I know we talked about it with T-zones, but as part of the kind of the goal setting around housing units is, what is this housing stock we have in that middle? My sense is we haven't added any in about 20 years in the city, and that's probably a big need. But I think if we start with how many units of housing we need, at what size, what type, what AMI level, that can help drive more initiative work for missing middle as well. Kind of the third general theme, and I think this relates to Mary Beth's comment about the website, is that customer service mindset. So we've talked about it with like the processes around getting a permit, whether it's business or residential. But I think in general, kind of making sure we think about treating our residents like customers. So whether it's you come in to get a permit, or you pay your taxes, or you report a broken traffic light, or whatever it is, but how can we improve those interfaces? And the website clearly takes care of a large part of it, but there's probably many other places that we don't have visibility into. And that feels like a theme that I think we had raised in the offsite. I think those are the big themes. I have specific items to kind of add that I think has come up. I haven't had a chance to crosswalk this plan with our last work plan or the retreat notes, but a couple of specific items that I would love to see, and hopefully my colleagues will support, is I think during the budget discussions, we talked about expanding our automated traffic enforcement. And I think the chief had reported that we have budget to expand 1 more red light camera with existing resources. So I would love to actually see that as something we put, again, a marker out there that we want to get done. Doesn't sound like it needs more resources. We already have resources based on what's budgeted. So let's do that, because if anything, red light running has increased in the city. Second is parking requirements. I think that was called out in there for commercial parking requirements, but I think it's evident from the Westmoreland challenges that it's probably time to revisit what our residential parking policies are as well. And I think the Planning Commission has offered to perhaps sign up to take that on for us. And then, let's see, let me look at my notes. Around, I don't know whether this fits under kind of the racial equity inclusiveness, but I think several of us have talked about wanting to be a part of the pilot for the mental health first kind of police response. I know that during COVID, we were kind of on the waiting list to kind of get involved in that, but that's kind of an initiative I would love to see whether we could, let's make sure we don't forget about that. And that's it for now.
All right.
Thank you.
Other comments? Mr. Snyder?
Well, first of all, thank you for a significant body of work here, and thanks for what you and all the staff do to keep the city running on a daily basis. A couple things. I'm in agreement, I think, with all of Vice Mayor Hardy's priorities that she mentioned. Specifically on transportation, I think there's a strong desire on the part of our public to sort of retrofit the city to sort of replace a lot of what was done in the 1960s that was car-friendly. I just think there's a new era here and a new strong desire to wider sidewalks. I mean, I've done more walking around the city lately, and almost every place you walk, first of all, they're narrow, and second of all, there's a pole in the middle of them. So I think I would underscore the need to be able to move more rapidly with the whole range of transportation projects and to be more effective at retrofitting the city to meet the desires of the present and the future. Secondly, on affordable housing, I agree with the missing middle in concept, but don't necessarily believe that should all or necessarily be addressed through the transition zones. I think we need to address that, at least in part, through the larger scale developments that are on the horizon. And the third area, I think, the Vice Mayor mentioned customer service, and the whole permitting area, I think, is areas where we need to focus and move more transparently and rapidly for the benefit of our citizens and or those who are interested in commercial development and commercial sort of activities as well. So, thanks.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Snyder. Other comments?
Is it my turn? Are we
Sure.
still going? Are we going to take a break? What's your
Well,
pleasure?
go ahead. I mean, if we can bang through, let's just bang through. unless you-
Okay. I don't have a whole lot to add to what's been said before. I actually sort of like the cast of the document as a reflection of the fact that we are a detailed, operationally oriented city council. I think, as you've heard up here, we all have, pretty specific to-do lists, somewhat overlapping, some reflecting our individual interests and backgrounds. So I don't mind a vision document or a retreat document or whatever we're calling this that reflects, a punch list of things that need to get done. I'm drawn personally to that. I think it is useful to look at opportunities for items on that punch list that, work into 2 or 3 different areas, like missing middle housing, for instance. Yeah, it can't all be on the backs of transition zones. It can't all be on the backs of even new development. I mean, I think the preservation of tree canopy and the preservation, if you call it that, of missing middle housing could sort of go hand in hand. I mean, there are plenty of, houses in the city that cost somewhere between $800,000 and $1 million, which I know it seems bizarre, but that is missing middle housing here in Falls Church. Anything that's under $1 million is almost by definition not something that is being built new. And the preservation of those existing homes through elevating, the sanctity of canopy preservation is an area where I think you might get people who might otherwise be at odds moving in the same direction. So I'd look for any opportunity to find items on this punch list that, speak to multiple concerns. The discussion of revenue generation, the last paragraph on page, I'm not sure what page it is, but the sort of summation of how we express different budget concerns, I'm not really sure that that paragraph is how I would reflect how we talk about revenue issues here. To me, the discussion of revenue generation is as or more important than revenue sharing. First, you've got to earn the money before you decide how to share it. And I think there is a fair amount of common ground on revenue generation through, economic redevelopment of underperforming, unattractive areas of the city that you've seen reflected in, generally strong support project by project for some of the developments that we've done in the last 10 years. So I would invite a community dialogue about how many of the things in this document on our list of wants are absolutely attainable without raising your taxes, as long as we commit to revenue generation and realization that our problem is not that we're taxed too much or taxed too little, but that we are leaving opportunities to earn money on the table where we should pursue them. And I think this council has done a good job of pursuing them, generally speaking, but there's more that we can do. The only other thought that I would say is, as I turn through this document, to me it's just a communications goldmine. I mean, I'll wager to guess that the average person living in Falls Church is generally satisfied with the way things are going. We don't always take that into account because we tend to hear from people who are not happy or want more, and that's great because we're a high aspiring community. But getting the story out about almost any one of these paragraphs is, a little write-up in a daily web communication that the city should put out, just to make people aware that, yeah, we get it, you want this, but, there's a whole lot of other things that people want, and we're working on all these things. And it's not a whole crowd of people that are doing all this work. There's a couple hundred people that are working for the city and generating a tremendous amount of work in response to community demands and needs and wants. So I'd love to see us, whatever shape this document takes in its final form, and I'm hunching that it is going to be sort of detailed and operationally oriented, that we take that as a assignment sheet for communicating out what we're doing so the citizenry is aware of all the efforts that we're undertaking on their behalf.
All right, thank you. So I, for starters, want to thank you. This is just a great piece of work. There's so much that went into it. I mean, just hearing you talk for 15 minutes made me realize how much went into it, and I thank you for that. And there can be refinements to that. We heard from my colleagues, and I generally concur with what you've heard. Are there things that maybe belong on here that aren't here? Maybe. But in terms of just sort of overall in general, I think it's a very ambitious document, a very ambitious work plan that I think is in keeping with the council that's standing or sitting before you. This is the kind of stuff we want to get done, and I think our community wants to get done. And so I think it's a great start for what we want to do and what we are going to do. And so I won't repeat some of the refinements you've heard from my colleagues. I would concur with those. But just overall in general, I like having a detailed list of things. I like having deadlines, details about it, specifics. And I think over these past few years, we have accomplished a lot, and this is just showing how much more is ahead of us. I would agree specifically with Mr. Duncan about trying to communicate these things to our community. I mean, this is a really ambitious plan for the next couple of years that I think we will execute. But it would be great if everyone sort of knew all that's going on and all the great work that the staff here in particular is doing on a day-to-day basis to make this a really desirable community to live in. So I think in particular, just communicating this documented what has happened and what it will happen is very important, and I think that's something we need to focus on as well. But overall, I think it's a very good start, so I want to thank you, at least on behalf of myself, for this. So anything else? Any other comments from folks? Ms. Hardy?
Just the question. So in response to kind of how ambitious it is, Wyatt, does this feel accomplishable based on your current staffing?
Well, you've got to love city staff, because when, we got together, we read the council report, and I am all about, let's have a disciplined work plan that we feel very comfortable that we can execute. And this feels big to me. This feels ambitious, and I'm worried about our ability to execute on all these things, frankly. And because with all of them, every one of them needs so much communication. If it's just a project manager going out and doing the contracting work, that's one thing, but it requires a whole team of finance support and project management support, OCOM support, to do them right. And every one of them has bumps along the roads and things that have to, be reset or rethought. So, but it is a reflection. I mean, when staff gets warmed up to a topic, they really do come up with a lot of, hey, these are the things that we've been talking about. I went to the Housing Commission. This is what we're talking about. I'm going to the ESC. This is what's being discussed. And so it ought to be on the plan. So that is a long way of saying I would feel more comfortable if we did do a bit more refining on this and being very intentional about what's in this and what's not. And sometimes if we overpromise, we kind of get ourselves sort of bogged down because there's too much that we're committed to. So if we could sort of keep in mind maybe another cut at this to have the council really say that these are the key things that we think are most important, so that we're all aligned on those things. I think that would be helpful direction.
I mean, I might suggest then you come back to something with us, the things that you think you may not have the resources for, or that you want more resources, or you need more money, or you need more people, or here's the things that we think kind of fall on the edge. Can we do it? I don't know. But I think giving us some more guidance about things that you find that maybe a bridge too far, or that require ramping something up in a significant way, I just think it'd be good for us. Sort of on the first hand, I think the assumption was we can do this, and then it's kind of getting walked back a little bit, which I understand, but I would just say to have a proper dialogue, it'd be good to know what it is you feel we may need to walk back, or you may have difficulty executing, and then what we can do to help you, or if it's just something like, I don't think we can do it, period, even with additional resources. I think it'd be good to have a little more of this discussion in a more concrete fashion, so that we don't have unreasonable expectations either from us to you or vice versa.
Because if anything, we've added to the work plan, right? We've all suggested, like, what about this, what about that? And so I'm cognizant of it, but have that explicit conversation with us saying, no, we can't do it, or you need to give me more people or more money to do it.
Either one of you goes next, that doesn't matter.
Can you just, Cindy, scroll down to the very last section? I'll stop channeling my inner Dancy now. I'm sorry, before Partnership for Education. This is where I felt like we focused a lot of the conversation on the retreat, was these kind of education of the community, how staff works, how council works, how our meeting systems work. And I feel like this is foundational to all the other things that, we can't do the big projects until all these things are just ironed out better. So I feel like this should take some priority over everything else to start out as we look at this plan. Because these are the things that create the web and the foundation for you to be able, for your staff to be able to do all the things that are in the rest of the plan. So I think this is really important.
Ms. Leon?
Wyatt, there's a love specific. I remember in our retreat, we talked about, specific, measurable, and actionable. So I love all the details in here. I think, what I'm reading in here is that the comp study is in fall, then the staffing ratio that really addresses how you increase your capacity isn't hitting until January 2023. So I think there's we're really open to understanding where your prioritization is, right? Knowing that we're really, you're kind of hampered on capacity and an analysis of that until we get the results of the comp and capacity, the staff study that we're talking about. So, I would be open, when I take a look at this work plan, to really clearly delineating when is T0 of this thing starting, right? And when is, the duration we're targeting is 2 years, but when is T0? When should it be, right? And really cascading from, the prioritization perspective, echoing what I've heard here. What is it that we can do with current staffing, and then what can we do incrementally, right? So iterative, incremental, manageable chunks of outcome delivery, right, is, I think, the best way to look at this. Because when you big bang things, it's just a lot of pressure. And we want to just manage expectations to our citizens and honestly to ourselves as the executors of the work, right, accordingly. So I ask that you think about that. When is it, align it with the time frame and how we make decisions, and a lot of that runs January to May during our budget conversations, and being able to look at this work plan and to know, okay, this is what we need to look at for this year, so that we have some sort of alignment. Does that make sense?
It does, and one note that you, the two-year plan is characterized in this draft as FY23 and FY24, and so it would be, T0 would be July 1, 3 weeks from now, in the way that this has been cast. And so some of these things do need some more budget work on them, and they're noted in that work plan, and so those would be things presumably would be in the next fiscal year, unless the council were to do a mid-year to fund a contract study or something like that. The staffing study is, we're working on the scoping of that right now, and maybe we can follow up on the details of those discussions at a later night. It's a complex undertaking.
Other comments? So, Mr. Shields, maybe you could bring this back. I don't know if you have an idea when you might want to bring this back to us with some additional thought and contemplation about, staffing and resources and the like. But maybe that could be something we do in the next, month or so. Would that be something that you think is doable?
Yes, and I could have an update at your next meeting on the 27th. If we don't do a deep dive, certainly be able to advance the discussion.
That'd be great. Okay, is there any more conversation on the work plan?
So you're thinking about just looking at the summer schedule, like July the 11th or something like that, for having a document that is in some way able to be presented to the community?
Yes, if I could provide an update on the 27th, and then we could have a work session again at the meeting on July 11th.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Okay, unless there's anything else on this item, why don't we move on to general things like business not on the agenda? We know we heard one thing. Did you have something else, Mr. Shields? Any business not on the agenda? Any counts, Ms. Conley?
I just have a concern about our session on Wednesday morning. The 8 o'clock session Wednesday morning, is this, I don't know.
It's not this Wednesday,
It's next
the
Wednesday?
following, yes.
Oh, okay, then forget it, I don't have a concern.
I'm glad I could help with that.
Other council comments, requests?
Just want to know what Mary Beth was going to be doing this Wednesday. I will.
Approval of minutes, Mr. Duncan, any thoughts on the April?
Yeah, I communicated with the clerk, who produced already a revised version of the minutes, which I've had a chance to look through. It certainly met the changes that I'd suggested to her, so maybe others have comments. I've read through it pretty carefully and would move to adopt the minutes of the meeting of Monday, April 11th, 2022, as corrected and presented by the clerk tonight.
I'll second that.
All right, Madam Clerk, Or we do these by voice vote, don't we?
Yeah,
All
you
right,
can do
all
a
in
voice
favor?
vote.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the ayes have it. Anything else anybody wants to talk about before we adjourn tonight? Any final words from anyone? All right. What do you say? We're adjourned. Let's call it a night.